Welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us again. I'm going to jump right in and get us going. And am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
That is the last slide. Hold on just one second. All right. Thank y'all for joining me.
Can I just say you may want to wait a second because there were a bunch of people on the old screen who were trying to get to this.
Yeah, I will. I'm not going to really get into it for another minute or two. We'll make sure everybody has a chance to get in here. I was just going to say that this talk kind of came about. I think it was back in 2014. I was asked to give a talk on weeping trees at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show in Seattle. And as I started to put it together, I started, kind of expanded beyond weeping trees, which kind of grew into this, and actually gave this version of this talk just this winter. The last talk I gave, or one of the last talks I gave anyway, up in Virginia at the Piedmont Landscape Association. But before we get going, I want to mention a couple of things. We had to cancel Ralston Blooms, our annual plant sale, but we have so many plants in our nursery that we need to get out of the nursery, that we are having a plant sale. The link you see on the screen right now brings you to our catalog of plants. It's not, you can't order plants right now, but this is just what we have, what we're offering, a little bit of a description of everything. It's, you can go to it now, you can copy this down. Couple things. As we get closer to ordering, and it's going to open on Friday at 10 a.m. for members, you'll be sent a link to the order form if you're a member. We ask you to please, please, please read all of the directions carefully. It seems like people get very excited about plants and don't like to read the directions, but please read the directions. We're trying to make this as safe for you as it is for us, so it's going to be really important that you look through and see how it goes. We're hoping people will follow directions, and preferably we hope that you'll pay with a check when you pick it up, because then there's just, you hand us a piece of paper and get your plants and you're on your way. So it starts May 1st. Is that right, Chris? That's Friday, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Realized I didn't actually check that date. May 1st at 10 a.m. all of our members will receive a link to the plant sale. Some things are in limited numbers, but some things we have a whole lot of. So there should be a really good selection for everybody. It's some really, really neat plants in there. So I think you'll be excited by what you see. And one thing, after you order your plants, so on Friday, after you order your plants, you'll go to a screen where it has a pickup day and time. Make sure you fill that out, what time you would like to pick up your plants. We're doing, I think, well, I can't remember, a certain number every 15 minutes. So
4 pickups per 15 minutes.
What's it,
for
4?
2 hours each day. Yeah, 4.
4 pickups every 15 minutes. So we're hoping people will be on time, be ready, and that way we can make this really efficient and minimize contact between everybody. All right. I think we have a pretty good number of people, but I did, I forgot to do this last time. I'd said I was going to, but I did go out today and take a couple of pictures. It's pretty bright and sunny. So some of the pictures I took were a little washed out, so I didn't use those. But one of the areas that's looking really good right now is our scree garden. And we'll be doing a plantsman's tour, focusing mainly on the scree garden next Tuesday at 11 a.m. That's Cinco de Mayo, May 5th. So you can join me, bring your margarita, and we'll have some fun out in the garden, looking at some really beautiful areas of the garden. Okay. So Cinco de Mayo, 11 o'clock, tour of the scree garden. But the garden is looking pretty darn nice right now. The waterfall is looking amazing. The mild winter really allowed some of the things we've got planted to really go. You can see the strawberry begonias are starting to flower there. Really looking great. Of course, the Japanese maples are fantastic right now. This one's Henna Matoi. That pink is incredible. There is no filters, no Photoshop going on, because I'm not good enough to do that. But just everything's looking so good. Could use a little bit of rain, but I think we're going to get some tomorrow. But just everything, colors seem so vibrant. And perhaps it's because I'm going out and I'm looking at things and wishing other people could see them. I think any other day I would go out and I would notice a weed over here. But today I'm just going, oh, isn't that blue and the gold fantastic together? You know, really appreciating it and wishing other people could as well. All right, let's talk about trees and plants and creating architectural interest in the garden. Like I mentioned at the top of this, it really started for me thinking about this when somebody asked me to talk about weeping trees, and that was somebody who knew me out in Seattle, asked me to do that, and mostly because they know how much I love weeping trees. I think they're just fascinating plants and beautiful, usually, sometimes not. But it kind of transformed into this, you know, architectural interest, because, you know, one weeping tree after another gets kind of boring. And there's a lot that creates architectural interest, whether that's, you know, things that weep, plants that are, you know, perfectly round, plants that are sheared into shapes, things that do, you know, look like something out of Dr. Seuss. There's a whole lot going on there. And, you know, I think there a lot of times are the kind of thing where you can put one in and it can be a statement piece, but if you do a bunch of them, they actually start to come together in some way. Although my design and aesthetic may be a little different than most people's. Like I said, I love weeping plants. They're pretty plants. You know, when you take something like a Katsura tree, those get to be huge trees over time. So a weeping tree can sometimes take up less space, although around its base, if it's weeping, it's probably going to be wider than just the trunk, but still might be more in scale with your garden, that size. This Morioka weeping is one great example of fantastic tree. One of the things that really interests me about weeping trees is that nobody quite knows what's going on with them. I mean, there are some things, they certainly don't, you know, plants tend to grow upwards, you know, towards the light. There is some geotropism that they will grow away from the ground, you know, go up. But we don't know quite why trees don't do that. And in some trees, it's a matter of, if you don't stake them, they'll just lay on the ground and never go up at all. Some trees will grow upwards, but then the branches weep down. So several different mechanisms that make plants weep. And I find that really interesting. You know, Japanese maples are known as weeping plants, the cut leaf, lace leaf Japanese maples. One that really kind of stormed the market is Ryusen, which was the first really true weeping, non-cut leaf Japanese maple. This is the original Ryusen at Kobayashi Momiji-en in Japan, and let me tell you, it's worth going to visit it. It's just a really striking specimen. I've got one in a tall blue pot by my front door where it's really beautiful. And with mine, I keep it thin, very much thinned out, so you see that cobalt blue between the bright green foliage. If I'd thought about it, I might have taken a picture of it, but I did not think about that this morning. One thing that I've picked up from the Japanese that I just love this idea. Usually in the US, when you have a weeping tree, it is either staked perfectly straight, so you have this ramrod straight trunk, and then it cascades over that, which is fine. It's great in a lot of situations. Or they'll do a serpentine and wind them back and forth as they grow it, which everybody has their own tastes. I cannot stand that. But in Japan, they'll take these trees, and you can see in this pot that it has latches on there. All these pots have latches, and they open the pot up, they plant their plant in there, put the soil in, and just pot it upside down. You might have seen this with tomatoes for growing on a balcony or something. And they grow it like this for actually quite a while. And then when it gets to the size they want, they'll unlatch it, open it up, and turn it over and either plant it in the ground or plant it in a pot right side up. And the end effect on these weeping trees is you get this really kind of natural growth habit. It isn't perfectly straight, and it isn't, unduly contorted, but you get it so it's like staking it up without having to stake it. And then when you turn it over, it'll start weeping down, but the trunk, everything will just seem so much more natural and free flowing, which I love. Now, part of the reason they do this in Japan, you can kind of see in the corner here, they have a bunch of seedlings or rootstock under this. So they water these plants and drips down and gets these. And it just, there isn't much space in Japan. So they double up quite a bit. And, it can, if you think long term, you can really do some neat things. This is at one of my favorite gardens in the world, Bodnant Gardens. Their quarry garden is down here. So where I'm taking this picture, I'm kind of up on a ledge looking down. But these trunks on these weeping willows have been trained upwards. They're easily 20 or 30 feet. I'm not sure exactly. In my head, they're 40 feet high before they start weeping. And I think I tend to exaggerate heights when I'm looking at them from above like this. But they are staked so far up before they're allowed to weep. Isn't that amazing? Now, we don't do that in our home landscapes because we don't pass them on, to our families and keep going. In Bodnant, they actually still live there. So some of the family still lives on part of the property, at least part of the year. So, but it has, from below, you get the effect of the weeping willows, except for they're up above you. And from where you stand up on this view, you're looking right into this, and you can just see the branches are just, it's just spectacular. And the idea that somebody kept staking and training this pair of trees that tall before letting them weep, I think is just an amazing testament to how gardening can be done in the right type of garden in the right situation. And certainly is art. Usually when we think about creating a hedge or a barrier, we think of a bunch of very upright, straight things. Here, you can plant these big weeping plants. It'll take you a little bit longer to get a hedge, but these spruces that are weeping always reminds me of like a line of woolly mammoths or something that are marching off, snuffleupagus, I guess. But it's great to think about things in different ways. You know, I've seen where weeping conifers have been trained along a pathway as almost a handrail, you know, and kept thinned out, not this full as this Norway spruce. This is, I don't know which one. There's several weeping ones in Bursa or Strata or one of these. You know, it goes from being this single specimen that you would have, this kind of hairy cousin it thing, to being, you know, just kind of a neat hedge. You know, and the weepers you can use them for things. You know, I do this in my gardens. I've done this in several different gardens where you use weeping trees to make a gateway. I did that with Ryusan Japanese maple at my old house. It was just getting good when I moved out. You know, we have the beautiful green cascade hackberry beside our cascade that arches over the path and makes a beautiful walkway under it. And it can really create kind of an entryway into a new piece of the garden. This is up in Virginia at Maymont Park, and it always drives me batty. If I had this wonderful Japanese pagoda tree, formerly Sephora japonica, now Stiphnalobium japonica, if I had this thing, I hope I wouldn't put a post to hold up this branch right here in the middle. You know, you could put a post over here and maybe a post over here. And, you know, even if I didn't have any reason to, I'd consider making a path that goes under there, because people like to be under trees and embraced by trees, especially weeping ones. If you grew up anywhere near a weeping willow as a child, you probably know what I mean. That's kind of this magical place to get in and under plants. We've got a weeping taxodium that I keep thinking we should build a deck around the trunk, because everybody wants to go in there and be under it, and they're compacting that soil under there, and probably be better for the tree if we made it so that people could go under there without really compacting the soil. You know, and if pruned right, you know, your tree doesn't just look good when it's flowering, but also in the winter when it's bare, it can be a real work of art with weeping trees. Unfortunately, this albizia or mimosa tree gets some kind of caterpillar webworm that we don't spray for because we don't like to spray, and it can look kind of ratty by the end of summer. And some trees look their best without any leaves on them. This is Fagus grandifolia white lightning, and you can see during the winter why it was named white lightning. During the summer, it's really kind of just a mound of foliage there. It's a neat mound of foliage, and I wish we could share it with people, but it is proven pretty difficult to propagate, to graft. We've had 3 successful grafts from about 5 different grafters. So we're still trying. We haven't given up on it, but it's a neat little native plant that was found here in North Carolina. Down in Texas, Stephen F. Austin, David Creech, who was a real kindred spirit with JC, and JC really inspired him in the creation of the Stephen F. Austin masked arboretum down there in East Texas, the part of Texas that's like Louisiana. And David Creech loves bald cypress, loves taxodium. Every time I go visit him, I come away with about 5 or 6 different taxodium that he wants me to plant and keep an eye on. And I think if I'd planted every taxodium he's given me here at the Arboretum, we probably wouldn't have much else. And every time somebody else goes and visits him that are from this area, he gives them taxodium for their gardens and for my garden and for the Arboretum. But I was visiting him one time and he showed me this, and he was just loving this. He had planted all these weeping taxodium, Cascade Falls, and had a little dwarf Jim's Little Guy taxodium in the middle. I went back and visited him about a year or so ago, and boy, it had grown in pretty nicely. It was this really neat place that you went inside. I mean, you know, as he said, you know, people plant those we call them sunflower circles, you know, where you plant sunflowers around and it makes a little hut. It's like, forget that. Do it with something like taxodium. And they all kind of have this, you know, every one is a little bit different, and reaching in, the tree in the center has gotten a little bit bigger. But how cool is that? You know, and now there's a way you're invited in. I wondered about that this time when he first showed it to me, because there wasn't really a way in and out of there. I guess maybe over here. It looks like they didn't have mulch, but it's kind of a neat concept. But, you know, weeping's not the only way to go. These upright, fastigiate, and columnar plants really do add architecture in the garden. They help define space. They draw your attention. You have to use them pretty carefully and judiciously, because they do grab the eye, even with, you know, contorted things around. This makes such a strong statement that you can't help but look at it. It looks somewhat unnatural in a natural landscape, which can be good. You often want that. You know, this yew here in this is out at Juniper Level Botanic Garden, and it is, you know, it's wild and woolly, just, you know, all kinds of plants out there. And then you have something like this that's in there that kind of settles everything down. It's not really used as a focal point, but it kind of anchors the garden down, helps keep it from feeling out of control when you have elements like this. The gazebo back here does the same thing, but it's that solidity and that structure to it that really does, where a weeping tree would not, unless it were really, really pruned and you know, really deliberately. I have never been able to get a great picture of this, but I love this plant, so I keep putting it in talks. It's a camellia, and this is it right here. If you look at my little pointer to separate it from what's in back, it is this very dense, tight camellia. It's fairly slow growing. We have one in the Lath house that I think we planted 2012, maybe 2013, and it's probably 5 feet tall now, and maybe 2 feet wide. And it's kind of that perfect evergreen column that people want. And then it has soft pink, almost white, perfect double flowers. I have no idea why this is not more widely available. I know Izumi, it is, in my mind, almost a perfect plant. It keeps a really great form, has beautiful flowers, doesn't get big, gives you that structure in the shade where we often need it. I just think it is fantastic. The hardcore camellia folks don't like it as much because they like great big honking flowers. You know, you go to a camellia, flower show, and the majority of the flowers that they show are really great big ones. And they don't care if it's on a big gangly plant, but I don't have enough room for that. So I like this in the home garden. Out by our parking lot, it's been there for a long time, since before I started, and I've been here 14 years, is this Fastigiate golden rain tree. And I sometimes consider taking it out. You know, the Courteria can be kind of weedy around. And then it leaves out, and I think, oh, how nice. And then it flowers. I'm like, how few big fastigiate narrow trees do we have that that have great flowers on them? And then it goes, you know, we get the fall color on it, and I think, oh, you know, this really is a very good 4-season plant. And so it still stays. But one of these days, we'll have to put in something new there, take it out and try something else. There are several of these golden fall, these columnar or fastigiate ginkgo on here. And I always, some of you have probably heard me say this before, often fastigiate and columnar are interchanged as if they are the same thing. They are not. This Courteria, this golden rain tree, is fastigiate. The branches all go up, but the branches might get long, but they go up. Over time, fastigiate trees tend to get wider and wider as they get older and older, and those branches kind of splay out more and more. True fastigiate trees are also more susceptible to our heavy wet snows and ice storms and things like that. True columnar trees have short branches. So all the branches aren't coming up vertically. They're coming out more or less horizontally like a typical tree would. They just have reduced internodes. They don't grow as fast and as wide out. And these tend to be much stronger in terms of not having problems with cold, you know, with winters and things like that, especially if you keep them to a single leader in there. Now, Blagon is how this was named in Europe. It's, I think, probably is going under a different name in the US. It's funny, I saw this plant, it was the first columnar ginkgo I had ever seen, first really full, nice one. Since then, people have sent me pictures from various places around where there's one, you know, that just was a seedling that was planted in town that just happened to be columnar or fastigiate. So I think there's several of these that are on their way out into the market. We actually have one of these in the garden. We got it 13 years ago. We've planted it. It has never grown. It is the exact same size it was 13 years ago. We're not sure what's going on with it. We're probably going to dig it up, put it in a pot, and see if we can really push it with some fertilizer. But I'd like to get another one. I'd like to get a good size one that already has a good start on it. You know, and sometimes these upright plants are not just upright. They're, you know, upright and twisted or contorted or whatnot. This is Isley Nursery in Oregon. If you want to see conifers in all their glory, you got to make a pilgrimage out there to the nursery. They're a wholesale nursery. They don't really sell retail, but you can visit some of their displays. You know, this certainly will draw your attention if it's out in the open like this, but you start putting it with other plants, and I think it doesn't have quite the same effect as a really super strong vertical. A little bit easier to tuck in, but look at that. It looks like you know, a green bonfire. That grows just like flames. I think it's pretty amazing. And you know, sometimes things go straight up and straight down. It doesn't have to be one or the other. This green arrow just shoots straight up, but then all the branches come straight down. Every once in a while, you'll get a funky branch that goes out a little bit more. If that is too narrow for your taste, you can do Jubilee, which is a little bit wider, but still branches hang down. There is a variegated one called Sparkling Arrow as well, but you know, I don't know that this was great placement. You have a piece of art here that's supposed to be, you know, typically you want art to be a focal point. But this, you know, wherever you plant green arrow, that's going to be your focal point. You just can't help it. So it kind of takes away from this piece here a little bit, which is one of the dangers with some of these plants. And plants can be manipulated. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be just the habit that they have. This is by the bonsai display at the National Arboretum. And I always come and visit this ginkgo. I love this ginkgo. It's real shady on this side. There's another building right over here, so it doesn't grow super well in between there. But just the way they're growing it, I think is beautiful. And I have yet to be up there at the right time in fall to catch this in all its gold. But I love how they've espaliered it. And I do think espalier is a fun way to grow plants. So for some reason, we're afraid to have plants too close to our houses. If they're properly cared for and it's the right type of house, you know, it's not going to hurt it at all. You know, and if you want, you can keep it separated from your house by a little bit. This is a great potager. There's a wonderful fruit and vegetable garden here at a private residence. But this apple is perfect. Is growing. I mean, this will give you more apples than a tree with a 6-inch diameter trunk that's being grown out and just allowed to kind of grow natural. The thing with a lot of plants, apples, if you want fruit trees almost always in general, but also if you want rose flowers on your roses, that's why grapes are growing like this. The flowers, you'll get more flowers on the growth coming off of horizontal shoots. So if you prune this every year and prune back any long shoots that come out this way and just encourage a lot of the spur growth, the little congested growth you get on apples where most apples are formed, you will bear more apples doing this. So when you see old European gardens and pictures and drawings where they have the walled garden where they do the kitchen garden, and they have fruit trees espalier around on the walls, there are two things there. They're getting heat from those walls, which helps them to escape late frosts that will kill the flowers, but they also get more production in less space by doing that. So it's a great way to grow fruit trees. And it doesn't have to be against a wall. It can be out in the open and you can build the structure and just do your plant on it that way. This is less ideal for actual fruit production, but great for providing interest, kind of year-round interest in the garden. This little spot in Philadelphia, outside actually a municipal building, if I remember correctly. And this is something called Belgian fencing. And you just have to get young trees and you have to start training them as young plants to grow the way you want them. And, at one point there were stakes here that really, helped them get this great shape on there. And often what people will do, like on here, is they'll let another piece grow, and that way if something happens to this branch, they can kind of start getting this branch going as well. And it's a neat way to do things if you like to do that sort of thing. I like seeing it. It's not something that I'm probably ever going to do at my house, but it is a neat way to grow plants. And using them, with these espalier things are making use of architecture that's already there to create more architecture, but you can use the plants to provide as much structure as the hardscape does. This is at the ethnobotanic garden in Jalapa, Mexico, and they've got these cacti that form this room and this pathway through here, and it's kind of a neat little space. They do great stuff with structure at that garden. A lot of it with, cacti, but just, planting so densely. And, these were all planted as young, small plants. So it takes forethought to see what that could become. And this is an old monastery. And so there's an entrance into that a courtyard in that old monastery. One little aside while I was there, this was getting set up. We were there with the director of the garden, and actually I was there with David Creech of the Taxodium, and our trip to Mexico was in part a pilgrimage to go see the largest Mexican bald cypress in Tule, the big massive tree, which is a whole story into itself. But so we were visiting this garden, and we were having so much fun with the director. It wound up getting dark, and they were having a wedding in the monastery. And when we came around, this is all kind of tented in with plastic. We came out, and you can see kind of right here, there's somebody up on a ladder frantically lighting all these candles in these globes here. It was the most elaborate thing I have ever seen for a wedding. And the director told us they do 2 weddings a year. And he gave us a figure, and I went back on my notes to see if I was inflating it like I do with heights sometimes, and I was not. He said it is $250,000 to do a wedding there, one of the 2. So the only people in the Jalapa area that can afford a wedding there are the drug cartel bosses. So they sign up for them, but there's like a waiting list to sign up for the 2 weddings that you can have there. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great if I didn't have to worry about, I don't know how many we have now, 50, 60, 70 weddings at the Arboretum, and we could do 2 a year and make more money than we do with all those we do. Pretty amazing. Sorry, that was an aside, nothing about architectural plants, but I did think it was neat. And a lot of what I've been showing so far really is about the plant's natural habit, but, we can do a lot to create that architectural interest. It kind of started with those Espalier plants, but trimming and hedging is something else. And, you go to England, go to Europe, and they have hedges. They have hedges everywhere. We don't have hedges. In fact, we have plants that are planted out, especially in commercial spots, that are supposed to be hedges, you would imagine. But I swear, I think designer or people who maintain landscapes commercially look at the plans that were drawn out originally when the plants were installed, and they see a bunch of little circles where all the plants were supposed to be. And so they think that around each plant, they're supposed to trim them into, meatballs or at least cylinders rather than let them grow together. Every time I go to England, every single time I come back and I'm like, where can I put a hedge? Where can I put a clipped hedge? Common sense prevails ultimately because I don't like clipping hedges, but I do always wish, really think this is a house on a big piece of property. And they've got things planted out, but you can kind of see as you come out this gate, it's mowed here. And there are plants out there, but then this is kind of meadowy, it's allowed to grow up. They cut it once or twice a year for hay. But inside the garden, inside this, where this hedge is the garden. And that's where they do, the flower gardening and make it beautiful around the house and make this wonderful living space. And then outside this, things are allowed to be a little bit more natural. And I love all the hedges you see there. And they're pretty easy to do. We just don't necessarily do them. This is my house. No, but isn't this great? I mean, you've got great, hardscape. This is Versailles, by the way. You know, and this great, if this were just solid behind there, it'd be beautiful. We'd look at that and say, that's great. That clipped hedge is beautiful. But when they make a recess in that clipped hedge, all of a sudden it becomes, you know, like a museum or a church or something. It really, really focuses the eye on that. You know, and even where there's, you know, so much formality, everything is symmetrical, everything is clipped within an inch of its life, paths are raked. And then look, you have this wildflower mix here, but because it's enclosed with these very structural clipped hedges, it's contained, and it's not, the wildflowers are no longer so wild. But they do, in what's otherwise a pretty austere garden, they do have pollinators on them and around them, and they do have beehives up near the house, and that's why they do some of these wildflowers like that. And you know, these tall hedges, now we're not going to do that at our home. Let's see, that guy's, you know, if he's 6 foot, you know, you're what, 12, 18, 20 feet maybe. You know, but that separates you from kind of the loose outside, that creating those walls. One of the RHS gardens, there are these series of little vignettes. So this was a wide walkway. I couldn't really get it all in a picture, and this was mimicked on the other side. So you could see from the middle, you could see that there was just this series of vignettes because the way they clipped these hedges down, and you could see that. Now from this side, they're a little bit higher. So when you look, you really get blocked. If you're close to this, you get blocked by this. But if you're walking up the other way, you can see that there's something peeking out behind it. So you get two very different experiences. As you walk this way, you kind of concentrate on this vignette, and they were all different color combinations. So you concentrate on this, you know, purple and orange predominantly, burgundy and orange color combination, and you're not distracted by the yellow over here. But if you come up this other way, you start to see what's beyond, and so it's really it beckons you on, and you tend to move faster as you move up the other direction. Fascinating. You know, and let me tell you, if you clip a doorway, a gateway into a hedge, I am there. I want to go through that. You don't even have to have a little cutout of White Rabbit calling you down there. I've read Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if I want to follow a White Rabbit anyway. But if you do that in a hedge, I am all about it. Even better if you put a little gazebo in there. You know, that always is going to draw me on, with a clipped hedge with a gateway. And, you know, clipping a hedge does not mean it has to be, you know, boring and flat. I searched for a picture of the hedge by, his name just dropped out of my head, a great plantsman in England. And he has just kind of this free-flowing one. This is another one in England. This is Matthew Pottage, his personal garden, the curator at Wisley. This is just a little small area. And behind that is where he has a little working greenhouse, and some of his plants that he overwinters are out there. And it's kind of a workspace, but you know, this gives this great texture around there. You know, and it doesn't have to, I've been showing all evergreen plants, but a clipped hedge doesn't have to be evergreen. This is Inkianthus in Tokyo, or no, Nico, in fall color. You know, when it drops all its leaves, it's bare, but there's still enough twiggy growth there to really block the view. In England, you see that done a lot with beeches. You know, or create a tunnel. This is out at the Bartlett Arboretum, where there, you know, it's kind of a display. So it's a tunnel that leads from nowhere to nowhere. But if, you know, you have garden spaces and you do this, it's a pretty neat experience, especially when it's all leafed out. I mentioned bodnot before. You know, the garden gods are smiling on you when you show up at a garden, not even remembering that they have a laburnum arch, a golden chain tree as opposed to the golden rain tree. And you hit it on perhaps the most perfect day to see it in flower. These are trees, but they're trained over this arch. I'd love to be able to get in and get a picture without people in there. They could probably sell those opportunities for big bucks. But, you know, behind me, where I'm the one taking the picture, behind me, there's a line of about 80 other people waiting their turn to come in and take a picture. But just imagine a tunnel of gold wisteria. That's what it's like. And, you know, if this were just an alley of golden rain trees, it would be spectacular. But by training them over this arch, it becomes just, you know, sublime. I don't know that I would call this sublime. This is a camellia garden in New Zealand. I actually took this because the hedge that they made this, or the structure they made with camellias here, are all made from Camellia japonica, Dr. Clifford Parks, our own local Cliff Parks, the camellia that's named after him. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is Heron's Wood back in the day, when the first time, when Dan Hinckley actually owned it, and Heron's Wood Nursery was here. And Dan had made this space with trees that he had bought. I think they were Carpinus, if I remember correctly, but I might be wrong. He bought saplings and pruned them into these shapes, tied these together, tied the tops together, and then just kept them pruned over time. And it made this really very cool space. He actually inspired me. I planted a bunch of Stachyurus between my neighbor's house and my house, and pruned them kind of two-dimensionally. It had this long bead curtain, and they moved in and ripped it out before, well, it had gotten pretty nice, but it was going to be spectacular that year. But, you know, they've ripped out everything at this point. Oh, well. But you know, you can do neat things with plants, especially when you get them young and you play with them a little bit. And they don't even necessarily have to be in the landscape. You know, there actually are some plants planted here. You know, this is a little topiary plant. This is a euonymus that naturally goes upright. You can see, well, I think it was a photinia that's kind of pruned up, and something that's topiary. But then these plants, you can see, these are Duranta, and these are myrtle, so they take these inside in the winter. So they're in pots, so they can be moved inside. But they keep them right here during the season, right on the in here and through here. They have a big open space at this garden for events and weddings and things like that. And so when they're having an event, instead of putting up an ugly sign or barrier or something like that, they just pull the plants out of the liriope here, and do kind of a double row of plants and pots that very effectively say, you know, no further. This is the end of the line. And I think it's a great way to do it. They're not in massive pots that you can't, you know, that one or two people can't move, but they're big enough that they're going to stay put when you move them. And by clipping them, something about that makes it kind of fit into the existing hedge here a little bit better. You know, we can, in Europe especially, but you know, you can take just a round-headed tree and clip it into a shape. This is a silver pear. You probably wouldn't want to do it with a silver pear in the southeast. It would get every disease known to man if you did that. But there are some things that you could mimic that with. You could take the southwestern evergreen oak, Quercus hypoleucoides, and wouldn't that be perfect pruned like that? The added bonus that the new growth that you get comes out shrimp pink. So you could substitute it. Or one of my favorite plants, the pineapple guava, Acacelloiena, lovely name, but really is a beautiful plant. You can grow that up and clip that into a shape. You don't see ACA nearly as much as you should, and that's mostly because they're kind of a pain to propagate. If you want 100 if you want 100 rooted cuttings, you should stick, 1,000 cuttings. They just don't root terribly well, but they do root. I talk to people who produce them, and they say, yeah, they don't root in high percentages, 20, 25% maybe. So growers don't particularly like that. But they're great, drought tolerant, wonderful in the sun. If you get one of the hardier forms like our NCSU hardy, they're very tough here, and they have these beautiful flowers. Now, if you're on the coastal North Carolina, you'll get fruit, and the fruit is delicious. For us, we generally don't have a long enough season to get the fruit, but these petals are thick and waxy and really thick textured and are sweet. They're really delicious. So not just edible, but really tasty. And, there's a lot of, I don't know what the word is, confusion about, really pruning trees hard. This is a technique called pollarding. This is an old technique. These are very, very old oaks, and they are pruned every year like this. You see it done with sycamores sometimes. So you get that great bark and you prune it back. What that does is it keeps the space open and lit. These are like 100, 150 years old, I think, if I remember correctly. If you let these all grow, this would be just completely shaded out. This would be like a forest under here. But by doing this, you make a space that gets shade, but sunlight comes through. The trees don't get so big, and it's something Europeans do quite a lot. We always talk about crepe myrtle, right? Where people come in and just whack the crepe myrtle off. We don't want that. But here, a little closer to home, this is a picture from Elizabethan gardens. These crepe myrtles are pollarded. This is a very intentional way of pruning. And in some ways, the difference is knowing what you're doing and how you're doing it rather than not doing it. If you pollard something, it should be fairly attractive during the winter and during growth. If you just whack the top off of something, head it back, as a lot of people say, your plant will be ugly almost all season long. And it's really is a difference of how and what, knowing why and how to do something like this. And people don't necessarily know how to love their trees quite like this, and so you get things like this where it does look like that Lucy cartoon where it's just whacked, the top's whacked off. You got to let that light out. So we're going to plant a tree that gets 35 feet tall, and then once it gets the height we want, we're just going to cut it flat across the top. That's not pollarding, and that's somebody not knowing how to really deal with a tree. And then of course there's bonsai, whether small or large. That's really creating a piece of art through horticulture. But it can be done on a big scale. Cloud pruning in Japan. The Japanese are not all wonderful about this. You can buy a plant almost this size. This is an osmanthus. You can buy one almost this size that's been pruned like that. In fact, I bet if you come into Akira Shibamichi's nursery in here and you lay down enough money, he'll get some guys out there and they'll dig this thing out and get a crane out and move it for you. But people buy the trees kind of already formed, and then they can just keep it pruned or have a gardener come out and prune it. But cloud pruning is has a very specific way of doing it, and part of it involves not letting anything branch down. Everything's flat or up, and no one branch is directly over another branch. So this picture is a little bit fuzzy, and you can kind of see the edge of a window here. This is the morning I left for my first trip to Japan, and I was with a couple other plantsmen. Actually, I was with Todd Lassane. This was right after he left, shortly after he left J.C. Ralston, and Brian Upchurch from North Carolina, and Ted Stevens from South Carolina. And we were flying out of Atlanta, and they picked me up at the hotel. I'd gotten in the night early because I was afraid a plane would be late and I wouldn't be able to, catch the plane to Japan. So as we were pulling out, somebody was joking about this wax myrtle, green meatballs, right? Got to have all the green meatballs. Everything's pruned into a green meatball. Well, and so I took the picture laughing and, could use it about bad American horticulture, pruning everything into a meatball. We get to Japan, and one of the first things I see is this. This is a Myrica. This is an Asian form, Myrica rubra, or Morella rubra now. Same genus as this, pruned into a big old gumball, just like this, and we were all standing around this, oohing and eyeing over it. There isn't a huge difference between that and this, but it has to do with where you are and how you view the plants. That make a difference. Context is everything, I guess. And of course, there's always, true topiary if you want to really create something architectural out in the garden. People who do this have way more time on their hands and way less to do with it than I do. But it is kind of neat when you see it done well. Rather than the really strict forms, I like a little bit more free form. This looks like a landscape that should be outside the Jetsons. They call this cloud pruning. This is at Isley Nursery again. The Japanese would, I don't know that they would quite go for this as what they consider cloud pruning, but still, it's a pretty neat way to use plants. I could see having some kind of mid-century modern house and having a bunch of plants out like that might be neat. And you can do fun things, prune your plants into a dinosaur or sea serpent like at Disney. There was actually growing up, there was somebody who had a line of boxwood that were pruned into elephants holding, trunk to tail, which was really, I always thought was great as a little kid, or I'm not sure if this is abstract or if it's supposed to be hands, but what it really looks like is somebody took people and turned them upside down and, they've got their head in the sand. Who knows? But you can do all kinds of weird things. Not sure this intent, pretty sure this intent. Good hedges make good neighbors, right? Or this. I think this is supposed to be a saguaro cactus. What it looks like to me is this more than a cactus, but to each its own. You can do anything. You can prune topiary little people if you want. Now the best place to see topiary, the way I like it is down at Pearl Fryer's garden. Hopefully many of you have been to Pearl Fryer's and seen what he has done. It's absolutely amazing, the things he has created. There are few places I've ever seen that kind of have this kind of passion and this kind of drive by an individual artistic kind of vision that is so singular to them. The one other place I've seen it, it wasn't plants. It was in Cuba, in an area of Havana called Fusterlandia. Fuster is this mosaic artist. This is his house. And you can come in and go into his house and take pictures and buy artwork from him. And he's completely covered his house and has since then gone out into the neighborhood and mosaicked walls in other people's houses, and other people have put art out there. It is a work of obsession. There's just no other word for it, but it is so cool. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. But, it doesn't have to be obsessive, and creating that art in the garden doesn't have to be, you without with hedge shears every day. It can be, utilizing the natural form of plants maybe, highlighting them with light. But it also has to do with how you look at the garden. A lot of times we are moving too fast to really appreciate things, but form always creates art in the garden if you're looking. And maybe that's one of the good things to come out of this shelter at home situation. Maybe we'll stop and look at plants a little bit more and see the art there. I don't know that there's anything that I've showed in this talk that is prettier than this Japanese maple encased in ice on a winter day. I mean, that is art. That's sculpture. It's ephemeral in this form. It's going to change. It's going to become something else. And yes, we do go in there and prune that every year. Tim gets in there and does some pruning and keeps it so that it has a form that's going to look its best all year round, but that is still a piece of natural art. So that is it. I'm going to end the talk like I began it. Just a reminder that there is going to be a plant sale. You can look at the plants for the sale right now at this website, but you can't buy them until May the 1st. We ask you to read the directions. Go to the website, read all the directions and the FAQs and everything. And then when you go order the plants, read all the directions again. So you can stay safe, we can stay safe. The sale, a link, if you are a member, will be emailed out 10 o'clock, May the 1st. If you do not get that email, by 10 o'clock or shortly thereafter, we have to send out a lot of them. Sometimes it slows things down. But if you don't get that, then you can email Catherine Wall or Chris Glenn or myself, and we'll make sure you get it. But first, make sure you're a member. And then make sure after you place your order on May 1st that you fill in you click on the link to get a pickup time and you fill that in. You won't be able to just drop by and pick it up whenever. Thank y'all all very much. I am more than happy to answer any questions at this point. I know Chris has probably been answering a lot of questions in the chat, but woo, it looks like there's a lot in there. I
think I got most of the questions, Mark, but someone did ask what were all the plants in the pots, the topiary ones.
Okay, the topiary plants in the pots, let me zip back to it. The topiary plants in the pots, I'll point out which ones those were. Give me just 1 second. I'll share the screen again. There we go. Okay, in the pots. Get my pointer. So these plants here are Duranta erecta, the pigeonberry. Often we get this just as a summer annual in the gold leaf form or the gold edged form, but it has pretty yellow flowers, pretty blue flowers and then yellowy orange fruits. These have just been trained on a standard. They won't survive our winters, so you'd have to bring them inside. These two are the common myrtles, so Myrtus communis. Those are clipped. And then this one that you can just see the edge of, that's actually the only one that's reliably hardy for us. That is Salix integra Hakuro nishiki, the variegated willow. One of the ones that if you keep it trimmed back like this, it has really vibrant white and pink variegation. If you just allow it to grow, it kind of loses that and becomes more green with a little bit of white. So it's one of those plants that really benefits from regular pruning.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Someone asked if all maples are 7-lobed.
No, all maples are not 7-lobed. There are completely unlobed maples. We have them here. You can get maples. So you can get maples single lobe. There's actually a maple called Acer carpinifolium. So it's the carpinus or hornbeamed leaf maple. And if I were to take one of those leaves off the plant and show it to somebody, it would be difficult for them to tell that it's a maple. On the tree, it's easier because maples are opposite branched and opposite leaves, and carpinus are not. But there are actually simple leaved, non-lobed maples that are evergreen that we grow here, and they're, you know, trilobed ones, and there are ones that are pinnate leaved. If you know box elder, that is Acer negundo, and that has pinnate leaves. And there are other ones,
Okay.
Acer henryi, that are pinnate.
So the one on the left here, I'm going to try to turn it around, this one, if you can see it. So that one's an Acer.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Were you asking
Sorry?
which one? Or I'm not sure, I can't remember which one's right there.
Oh, sorry. I thought I showed the leaves. It's really hard to pull
Yeah.
them down. This one, if you can see it. I don't know if I'm aiming the camera very well.
Nah, seeing your arm. But not the camera. I got a couple other questions. There was the question about white lightning that came to me privately. White lightning is one of only two that I know of cultivars of our native beech, Fagus grandifolia. And that's one that came from, I believe it was Chatham County. Somebody told me about it. We went out and visited, and they said, well, dig it up and take it since you're so excited about it. And so we did, and we have had trouble propagating it, but we're still trying. Question, how can I learn to prune trees? I've been trying to get my 20-year-old Japanese maple into a better, less bushy shape. That's a great question. We have some pruning classes that we've done here. We do a lot with, we do some with rejuvenation pruning of shrubs, but we could do a pruning class, and maybe a Japanese maple centric pruning class would be in order. I think that would be a great one to do, and something we could certainly think about. Is the Pearl Friar topiary garden open to the public after COVID? Yes, I believe it is. There's a lot of people who are hoping they can save that garden once Pearl Friar's gone. That's the issue with a garden with a singular vision behind it and singular obsession, is how does it remain? That's, quite honestly, why we were so keen to partner with Juniper Level Botanic Garden. Tony is his garden is the work of a singular obsession, and a little bit different than something like Pearl Friars or Fusterlandia, but it's something that we do want to preserve and continue that legacy, and think we're set up to do it.
I put the dates and times in the comments. It's Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
There you go.
I don't know the clue right now, but I don't know.
How do the Chinese prune the flowering trees to make those swoopy branches? I'm not sure. Wait, you can unmute yourself and explain that a little bit more to me, because I'm not sure.
Okay, this is me.
Yeah.
Carolyn. I asked the question. So I was in the Forbidden Garden in Beijing, and they had these branches, and you actually had one at the Arboretum that's pruned like that too, where you have it go like this. It's like it swoops down and comes up into U-shaped forms, but it's like You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe
like
it.
doing natural garland. Is that
I
what?
guess. Yeah, yeah. Sort of
Um,
garlandy shape to them. Yeah.
It's just a matter of you put something there that you can kind of, as the plant is just growing, you know, young stems are flexible, that you can do on there, and then
So you think it was formed by wire or something to make that bend?
it was, if it was in China, it was probably formed by bamboo slats that they bent there.
Wow.
Chinese are very patient gardeners. It's funny, I
So.
quick aside, because we have a lot of volunteers on this call. I was in a garden in China, and usually I visit nurseries in the wild in China, but we were in one of the big gardens in China, and there were a whole bunch of people who looked to be about the age of many of our gardeners, i.e. Retired, you know, in retirement age. And there was a whole bunch of them, they're weeding in under these big trees and kind of this field of ground cover. And I asked the person, "Ooh, are those volunteers?" Because I wanted to get a picture of the volunteers. And you want to talk about words that do not translate. Volunteer, they did not get that word. But no, when you've got, you know, 1.5 billion people, there's a job for, you know, a job for everybody. Yeah. No volunteers. Any other questions, either on the chat or feel free to unmute yourself now. I can do questions.
Mark, I loved seeing the photos of what's going on in the garden right now. Please,
Yeah.
if you can, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if you're on Facebook, but keep an eye out on Facebook and social media. Tim has been doing a great job of taking pictures. We've been told that we can only have staff in to do mission critical things like keep collections alive. And in my mind, keeping people inspired and passionate, and keeping connected with our members and volunteers is a mission critical task. So I've told Tim, you know, keep everything alive, and then, you know, zip through the garden and take some wonderful pictures and get them posted. So, you know, so look for those. And, you know, Facebook has all those algorithms about what you see. If you like and share stuff that we have, more of that will pop up in your feed. So in whatever Facebook, Instagram, whatever you use, it works better that way. So that's one way to see it. And like we said, next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, we'll be doing a tour of some of the things that are really looking good in the Arboretum.
Someone just asked if there's a crepe myrtle pruning seminar. We usually have one later in the season with Basil from Leaf and Limb.
Yeah, Basil at Leaf and Limb he's an arborist who's really passionate about, you know, the proper care of trees for their best health. And he does a great crepe myrtle pruning demo. He's a big supporter of the Arboretum, has done a tremendous amount of pro bono work with us, is really, really great arborist. And you should go to his website. They do an e-newsletter with videos and really, really good stuff. Fantastic. Leaf and Limb. Any other questions?
Thank you for that.
Yes. Well, thank y'all all for joining me. This is my release to actually be able to talk about these things and share it with people who love it all as much as I do.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.